This isn't the final destination of your innovation journey, but it is the next step. Welcome to the Synapse Podcast. Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Synapse Podcast. Today we are joined by Dave Vanz of Orlando Life interviewing Paul Sohl. Paul is a former Navy commander and pilot and current CEO of the Florida High-Tech Corridor. The corridor exists to converge and catalyze the capacity of high-tech, innovation, and bright minds all across Florida. And really, the Synapse mission and the corridor mission are so tightly aligned that we had to have him on as we look ahead towards Synapse Orlando in Orlando on October 21st. Paul will be sharing his Synapse story, how human connection sparks innovation, and how you can take the next steps on your innovation journey. I hope you enjoy it.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, who
Sure.
you are, what do
Sure.
you do?
Paul Sohl, relatively new CEO of the Florida High-Tech Corridor. That's 23 counties. I consider it Central Florida. It's from Tampa, Orlando, Gainesville, all the way to the Space Coast. Been at this now just under 2 years, so it came in the thick of the pandemic.
During that pandemic, you got connected to Synapse.
Yeah.
How did that connection happen?
Yeah, so great question on the connection to Synapse. One of the first connections, and if you remember, we were all on Zoom, so I could do a ton of connections all the time. They had reached out to me. I talked to Brian and Lauren, and we realized that we're kind of aligned in what we're trying to do, in the idea of innovation, entrepreneurship, connecting people. One of the first things I remember from that conversation was, and I agreed with Brian, all the pieces are in Florida. They're all here. Now, how do we, as great chefs, how do we pull that together? So that's what started it. Then they immediately pushed me out of my comfort zone and had me moderate a panel with the Department of Energy and Innovation. And it was an interview with their chief innovation officer, and I got to learn so much just being sort of enveloped in what the Department of Energy was doing, and that started it.
What draws you to innovation?
Yeah, so great question. I've always liked on the innovation side the idea of being out of your comfort zone. The military has been great. I for 33 years, I loved every single day and never considered it a career. The challenge became that it's a bureaucracy, and I began to lose kind of a connection with the sailors and the Marines who were out there doing our nation's business, being out forward deployed, and their frustration of not being able to do their jobs because they could just use that next bit of equipment. I've always believed the thing I've learned in the Navy is the best ideas come from within 50 feet of the work. That has always been the case. So how do you figure out, and that's the innovation side, the ability to say that person or that team has an idea to solve that problem, let's support them. And so that's kind of what drew me into this blessing, this opportunity to be able to do it.
So you wanted to start looking outward, outside of the circle or bubble, whatever you want to call it, to find the answers that could be a support in an effort to the people that you have worked side by side with.
Yep, and I think, and that's a great point about sort of working on the business instead of in it. And being able to look at what are the resources are out there. So I think about Synapse as a great example. I was and I'm still on a listening and learning journey with the corridor. I kind of had this idea that, that'll be done in 90 days. I'll be able to take what I've learned and move forward. No, it'll be a decade to really understand. And that's where Synapse comes in for me, is this hyper-focused one-day event of getting to see it's more than technology. It's the people behind the ideas and the outcome of those ideas, who it can help. That's one of the things we're taking in on the corridor side, is this idea, tech for tech's sake misses the point. It's tech with a purpose. It's tech with a reason for creating that outcome. And that's what's exciting, just to play in this sandbox.
What is it about Florida, do you think, that is so interesting, specifically around innovation?
Yeah, so interesting about the innovation side, and there are a couple of things I've learned on my continuing journey. One thing is, nobody's from here. Very few people are native Floridians. So what that leads you to have it's a very yes and climate, very, very open to collaboration, very curious. People are absolutely curious about what you're doing. And I see that in the genuine interest in not only what they're doing as a team, but what somebody else is doing. It's what led our family to Central Florida, was this idea of yes and, not no because. And sometimes we get that in other parts, but to me that's part of the magic of Florida, is nobody's from here. And that one of the ideas in the corridor that we're focusing on is boundary breaking collaboration. Not just collaboration, but true boundary breaking. How can I go between sort of siloed technologies, or between individuals, and how would that work? There's a great book called The Rainforest that talks about innovation ecosystems, and one of the things I pulled from it was this idea that the hardest connection to make is the one-on-one. That's the most important. So you take events like Synapse, you can't help but bump into people, and you can't escape the Zoom disconnect. Sorry, didn't want to have that conversation. That's the heart piece. And once you get emotionally connected to, you name it, the child that has a prosthetic device from a company called Limitless, where the child now sees that as a badge of honor because they were allowed to help develop it and put the artwork on it, or the cancer business that's here in Tampa that's creating a system to be able to test chemo drugs. Instead of putting it in your body and waiting for 6 months, let's take your cells, pull them back, let's test a bunch of drugs, and in a matter of weeks get that result. I can't help but feel connected to that outcome, that impact, and it's going on across the board here in Florida.
How do you see what Synapse is doing, how this is breaking down those barriers?
Yeah.
What is it that's unique about Synapse? There's a lot of events and conferences. I mean, people travel to Florida for various reasons, and a lot of it is always events and connecting industries and whatnot. What is it about Synapse that you see, from your perspective, that makes it unique?
Yeah. Start with the people. Start with Brian. Start with Lauren. And one of the things that I try to do, because everybody's time is limited, is find out where the energy is. Go to the energy and then dig in there. Or in the Navy, what we would say is go to the pain. Find the pain and start there if you don't know where to go. In this case, with innovation, I would say go to the energy, go to the passion. And perhaps that's one of a couple of good skills that I have. I don't have many, but there are a few of them, and I can see where the energy is. And you could see in Synapse, you could see in Brian and in Lauren what that organization stands for. And you could tell instantly, we're climbing this hill. I don't care if it takes us 5 years, and I don't care if we fall down. And then for me, that then allows me to engage the corridor and say, we're going to be with you. We're not going to be there for you. We're going to be with you on this journey. And that, I think, is what makes this thing unique across Florida. And I think it couples with the very thing you described, is that unique buzz, that unique vibe about Florida.
There's obviously a presence for universities here. What is that connection, and why does it exist?
The fact that we have, think about it. And I'll describe the story behind how we got the 3 anchor university presidents to come to Synapse and have a chat. It actually was an idea hatched not at my discussion with Brian, but inside the teams. And they said, imagine if. Imagine if. Do you think we could get 3 presidents here at once? How would that look? What would that mean? And I heard a little inkling that they were going to try this, and I said, go. You don't need my permission. Let's see what we can do. And lo and behold, all 3 wanted to participate. And I think that's going to be huge for this community, because I think sometimes when you think about UCF and UF and USF, if you don't know them and how they work in the innovation space, you would think, they're a giant corporation. How can they help? They're too busy. It's not the case. They are committed to community building. They are committed with their incubators and their business schools and the curricula that they develop. They're committed to entrepreneurship. They're committed to educating future entrepreneurs. They all agree that even in the entrepreneur education piece, it's more than just creating a business. It's a way of really thriving in this next century. So we don't know what the jobs are going to be, but if you take the tenets of what it means to be an entrepreneur, to be able to give, to be able to learn, to be able to sit back and challenge your own assumptions on things, to be part of a team. It's all about entrepreneurship, and that's what it'll take to, I think, thrive in the next 50 years.
Love that. I do want to go into your call sign, but I have one more question before that, because I don't even know if that will make the cut. Who knows? It may not fit, right? I'm just curious, right?
Of course.
What would you say to those companies that are innovating that maybe haven't connected with Synapse yet?
Yeah.
What would you say to them about this event?
Yeah, great question. Because and one of the things I've learned is those small companies, they're heads down, right? They're plugging away, going, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do that. And I would say, take a second, get your head up, come to an event like this. You simply don't know who you're going to run into. You don't know what you don't know. That's one of the amazing things about innovation. It is very much like a rainforest. If you walk through a rainforest, you might think that that snail that I just stepped on is probably not important. If you really realize how that works, you'll realize that, oh wait, there's a magic of that piece. And it's those pieces here in one concentrated chance to make that to break down that first barrier, to say, oh, I've got a card and it's connected with a face and it's connected with a person that has kind of the same mindset as me or maybe completely different, and I want to call them. And that's the value of something like this.
All right, let's dive into your call sign.
Okay.
Talk to me about your call sign. What was your call sign, and what's the story behind it?
So just background, aviators, we all have call signs or nicknames that we use. Typically in flight school, you start out something usually based on your name. So mine was Sohl Man, and the last name was Sohl. That seemed reasonable. You also realize that when you get to your first squadron, they will give you a call sign. They don't let you keep yours. In that case, it was Lips. It really was kind of assigned. I had no idea, except I did get it from a guy who had a pretty cheesy mustache, and he had made a comment. He said, well, Paul, when you smile, your lips don't cover your teeth. And I go, okay. And he said, we're going to call you Lips. And at the time I thought, that's probably harmless, okay, because the other thing you don't do is you don't object, because if you object, it's solidified. Fast forward about 5 years, ran into at my tour of duty at China Lake, Navy captain. So he's an 06, he's been in for 25 years. I had been in for 7, 8. His call sign was Lips. Doesn't really matter that you have the same one until you go fly together. We flew together on a mission, on a test mission. I got it all screwed up because he was using Lips, I was using Lips. We got all confused. And so he brought me in to what we call the ranch, which is where all the test pilots are. We type up our reports and do things. And he said, hey, young Lips here needs a new call sign. And my life flashed before my eyes because I said, I'm too old for this. This is bad. And a great friend of mine, Tom Huffer, who kept his call sign from his name, said, let's just call him Lips Jr. So LJ stands for Lips Jr. My Navy father is Doug Henry, Dog Lips, Lips for short, and so he's my dad, and that's the lineage. There isn't a Lips the third, from what I can tell. Our kids, our oldest one is Luke just graduated from college. He's not going into the Navy, so I think it stops at Lips Jr.
That's fantastic. There's a saying when I was doing some research and I asked some people some questions. There was something, and I don't know if it's your saying or it's just something that they said to describe, but it was rising tides lift all ships.
Yeah, sure. So I do use a lot of, and I'll just sort of talk about some Navy analogies here with the corridor and kind of how things work. One is I consider the corridor in its 23 counties kind of like an aircraft carrier, but because for the last few years prior to my arrival, it was kind of in port. It had some things going on, but I didn't sense a real direction. And we learn in the Navy very quickly, ships are designed to be out at sea. That's what they do. And so taking the corridor out to sea is my mission. The only difference between this aircraft carrier called the corridor and a regular one is my power plant is not a nuclear reactor, it's 10,000 little outboard motors. And I got to get these things turned on and kind of aligned and adjusted and be able to get this ship moving. And I'm seeing that already. And it's not anything I've done. It's really tapping into and unleashing that energy from the region, for sure. The rising tide piece is really important too. When we talk about the corridor and I talk about community-driven innovation, it starts at the community level. I can sense that in Florida. Just go around here and you meet those community builders, and that's what we are in the innovation ecosystem. If you start at the community, you absolutely know that you're going to lift everyone up, that they will see themselves in technology. Too many times we leave creativity on the cutting room floor. We leave kids who don't see themselves in tech. They need to see themselves. I sat down with a lady this morning from St. Pete who's involved in underserved communities, and they have 2 students who are here. That's magic. They are going to be able to go around and begin to see themselves in this world. That excites me. That gets me up every day. So I hope to run into them.
That's awesome, man. Thank you.
You're welcome.